What happens when the inevitable strikes? You end up in the nursing home. How do we make sure that you get the care that you need, or that your spouse gets the care that they need, without giving all your money to the nursing home? How do we make sure that you actually get to keep it and bring some, send some back to your kids after you pass away? And I've heard this so many times, right? I don't want the nursing home to get all of my money. How do we plan for that? Today, I want to cover how does some of this Medicaid long-term care planning work? What are some of the options we have? Like, what happens if we give money away to our things, in the clawback and all these different rules that you've probably heard of? I want to clarify some of this stuff for you today because it's a question I get a lot of, and I think it would just be helpful. My name is Freeman Linde. I'm a certified financial planner and tax expert, and I help clients every day who are getting close to retirement or who are in retirement make that transition and retire successfully and stay successfully retired. And so we do everything, including long-term care planning, not long-term care insurance sales. We're fee only, we're fiduciaries, we don't sell anything. And so I'm not here to pitch you long-term care insurance. We'll talk about it, we'll address it a little bit, but really we want to look at what does it look like to say, hey, what are some of our options here? When does the government step in? How much assets can we have? All these different things. And so let's dig into it. Couple things for you here. One, this is Wisconsin specific stuff. I'm from Wisconsin, so I know their rules best. It's going to be similar in a lot of other states, but you need to look up your specific states for specific numbers. I'm not an attorney, educational only, yada, yada. Pause the video, go back and read that if you want to do that. So, okay. What are we trying to find here then? What are we looking to do? So a few different terms here, right? When we're looking at long-term care / Medicaid planning, a few different things. So Medicare is health insurance for people over 65, and it doesn't pay for long-term care. It doesn't. A lot of people think that, when I have Medicare, it'll cover that. No, it doesn't. It doesn't pay a dime for that. Medicaid is health insurance plus long-term care for people in poverty, people who can't afford to do it themselves. So it will pay for long-term care, but again, only for those in poverty. And a couple other terms that I think will be helpful to this is you have the institutionalized spouse. And so if you're married and you have an institutionalized spouse, that's the one in the nursing home, right, in care. And the community spouse is the one not using long-term care, who's still at home, still out in the community, right? Institutionalized spouse is not the same thing as incarcerated spouse. That's a totally different thing there. So hopefully that makes sense there. And so what does this mean, right? So an important thing, right, is that Medicaid does not kick in until you reach a certain level of assets and income, right? So when you generally think about it, right, you're allowed to have a certain amount of income per year and a certain amount of assets that you get to keep before Medicaid kicks in. Again, Medicaid is for poor people, for people who don't have enough to cover on their own. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, right? Some people just there's poverty levels in the United States, the official way to measure that, and some people are there, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Net worth and human worth are not correlated at all. And so I hope none of this comes across as derogatory, but it's just true. Some people can't afford care, and so the government, Medicaid, will step in to cover that if you can't afford it for yourself. So what are those levels of assets? Well, two different things. One, you get income that you're allowed to keep. So if we think about this, right, let's see here. Let's do this. So let's say we've got, Chuck and Diane, and Chuck is going into the nursing home, so he's the institutionalized spouse, and Diane is staying at home, so she's the community spouse, right? And basically, what are the levels of assets? Let's do income. What are the levels of, what are the levels of income that Diane's allowed to keep, and what are the levels of assets that she's allowed to keep, right? And so basically the way that this breaks down, and actually let's do assets first. So number one in assets. If they had less than 100,000, and these numbers are rounded. Actually, I might just flash this up here. Let's do this guy here. In 2026, these numbers go up by inflation every year. This is for Wisconsin. There's a community spouse asset share, CSAS. Government's got to put acronyms on everything. And so you're allowed to have, for countable assets, if you have less than $100,000 of total countable assets, these are investment accounts, all these different things, right? You are allowed to keep 50,000 of it. So if you have 60,000, you're allowed to keep 50. If you have between 325 and 100,000, then you could keep 50% of it, right? And if you have more than 325, then the 162, which is 50% of 325, is the maximum you're allowed to keep, right? That's how much they'll let you keep, and you want to put that towards the towards care. And for the institutionalized spouse, they get to keep $2,000. So the way this works, right, is let's say Chuck and Diane have $2 million total between all their accounts. Oops, I got to get this up in view here. Let's just do it. There we go. So they have $2 million, right? And so they would need to, right? And so they're spending it, they're doing whatever. Then Chuck goes into the nursing home, right? And they're wanting care. Well, the government's going to say, hey, we'll pitch in, but you need to, since they have $2 million, which is obviously over $325, they would need to spend this down, all the way down to $162,000 in 2026 before they would kick in and help with things, right? So that's a lot for them that they would need to spend down. Right? So you got assets. The other thing that you're allowed to do is for the income side of it up here, number 2, income. Well, actually, other things in assets. So they're allowed to keep 162. So 162 of assets, countable assets. And then you have non-countable assets, right? So you're also able to keep your house. So you get 1 house, not 2. You've got another one. You can keep 1 vehicle. So bloop, bloop. Don't really know how to draw a vehicle. There's your vehicle there. One house, 1 vehicle, and some personal property plus burial arrangements, like certain things like that, right? A couple other little things. But for the most part, 160,000 assets, house, vehicle. Some weird stipulations on retirement accounts. That's very state specific, but generally that's what you're allowed to keep. Okay. As far as income goes, that also changes each year. And so, they're not going to, there's this threshold where they're not going to impoverish the community spouse in order to care for the institutionalized spouse, right? So with assets, you get that. With income, in Wisconsin for 2026, you can keep up to $3,525 per month. That's the community spouse's share of income. And that can go as high as $4,066 if you've got really high housing expense. There's some certain things you have to do to qualify for that, but that's what they're going to allow you to keep. Which means that, right? If you've got, let's say that Chuck has Social Security of $30,000, and Diane also has Social Security of $3,000, right? So they have $6,000 in total monthly Social Security, right? So what they're basically going to say is, hey, we'll kick in after you reach these asset levels. Diane can keep a house, she can keep a vehicle, she can keep personal property, and she can keep $162,000 in assets. Then we'll kick in, but we're not going to kick in everything. We're only going to kick in the amount that you need. So let's say that care is $8,000 a month, right? And you've got $6,000 a month that's coming in. Well, we'll let Diane keep $3,500, right? Because that's I'm just rounding that. And you've got $6,000. So it'd be $3,500 off of this. And so we need you to be contributing $2,500 out of your Social Security. We would expect that'd be your expected contribution. We see you have $6,000 a month coming in. We expect you to contribute $2,500. So $8,000 minus $2,500 then is, what is that? $5,500. That's how much they would contribute Medicaid per month. Medicaid. There we go. Okay, so after you reach the levels of assets, then you would be able to keep a certain amount of income, and then they would suck up the rest. Now, you might say, well, I can't live on $300. My community spouse can't live on $3,500 a month. Too bad. They're going to do this math and they say, well, we're only going to contribute $5,500. And you might say, hey, well, we need $6,000 to live on, and so we can't give you anything. And Medicaid says, well, we'll give you $5,500. And the nursing home says, well, we need $8,000. And so we're not going to let you stay here until we get it. And you say, Medicaid, can't you give me more? They need $8,000. They say, no, we're only going to do $5,500. So you just have to come up with it. Right? And so Medicaid, again, it's for people in poverty. And so they're not going to make the person completely destitute. But if you need $6,000, if that's your lifestyle, they're going to basically put the community spouse into poverty. If you think, hey, we can never live on $6,000 a month, $3,500 a month is poverty, right? Medicaid is for people in poverty. And so they're going to make the community spouse basically live in poverty before they kick in, right? And so that's where people would say, okay, well, can't we give some of this away? All right, what if we what if we gave away all of our money here and we went down to like, let's just say we went down to 162 and we gave that to our kids. Can we give all of our money to our kids now? And then they can just gift us money annually or monthly for us to live on. Well, couple things. If you do that, it's their money, right? So you spend all this and you can spend it down, or maybe you give it to an irrevocable trust, or you give it to your kids. Okay? Well, it's their money. If you give it to the kids, it's theirs. They don't have to give it back. It's like, well, we trust their kids. Okay, but if you give them $2 million or $1 million or $500,000 or whatever it is, it's their money. They don't have to give it back. It's tax ramifications for gifting that much. If it's all in IRAs, you got to pay all these taxes. You can't gift them an IRA. You have to pull the money out, pay a bunch of taxes on it, then give it. That gets really hairy, right? You can give it to an irrevocable trust, but it's irrevocable. You can't get it out. And you might run into this case where, hey, we put $2 million in there. They're demanding we get the money back out, which we'll get to in a second, and the money's gone. And you're like, well, hey, I can't get to the money. And they're like, too bad. We're not giving you anything because you had that money. And so that's where it gets us into what's called look back, right? Is that when you apply, so this is your app to Medicaid, right? When you apply to Medicaid, they're going to look back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? There's a 5-year look back. And they say, hey, could you have afforded this in the past, in the last 5 years? And if they look back and they see that, hey, 5 years ago, you had $2 million. And then somewhere between years 3 and 4, you went from $2 million to $162,000. We think you just gave that away. And so they'll help. Medicaid will chip in. But basically what they're going to do is they're going to say, hey, we'll chip in this $5,500 a month after you have paid the $5,500 yourself, divided by the number of months it would take to spend that down from $2 million down to 162. Right, so if you're going, we saw that you gave away $1.8 million. So after you have contributed $1.8 million to your own care, then we will chip in. And you say, well, I don't have the money anymore. Like, go back and get it from wherever you gave it. And if you give it to your kids, go get it back from your kids. And after you've paid $1.8 million towards your care, then we'll chip in. And then you say, well, what if I put it into an irrevocable trust? I can't get it back out at all. Too bad. That's your fault. We're not contributing anything, right? And so it gets very sketchy. There's a bunch of tax problems with just giving money away. And if they look back and they see it, then you're completely hosed, right? So really, if this happened and you went into care here, you definitely just wouldn't apply until it had been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You wouldn't apply until here, right? But now you're down to this amount of assets, and so you can ask for it back if you can, right? Maybe your long-term care. I don't know. There's some really fancy ways to maybe try to avoid that, but it gets really sketchy really fast. And so then you would apply, and they'd look back, and they'd look back to here, and you'd say, okay, then we can chip in. But again, what if you don't need it? What if you don't go into care until here? Okay, well, now you've just lived on $162,000 for your whole life and try to get money back from your kids and cause all these problems, right? And so I don't like that. The other thing that people say, well, hey, can I just buy if I can keep a house, can I just buy a $2 million house? Or a $200,000 car? Can I get a Bentley? Yeah, they'll actually let you keep a $2 million house and a Bentley. But that's where you have, you've got look back. And then B, you have clawback. And that's where after you finally, at some point in here, you finally die and you go away, and your spouse and the community spouse finally dies and passes on. Yes, they'll let the spouse keep the $2 million here and the $200,000 car, but when the community spouse dies, they will look back and say whatever they can recoup out of that, whatever they can claw back that they've paid, they will try to get that back. So if they've paid $550 a month, that's what is that? That's 55, 60, $66,000 a year? I don't know, something like that. $66,000 a year for 10 years. Then they will claw back $660,000 from the sale of that house before they do it. Right? And so in some ways, doing that stuff, buying an expensive car, buying an expensive house, it doesn't protect it ultimately from the nursing home getting it or Medicaid getting it. It just prevents them from getting it before the spouse goes. But they'll get it eventually. Right? So you're like, well, all this kind of sucks. Well, yeah. But here's the thing. Right? If you if you need care, it's health care for you. Who else should be paying for that? It's your health care. Why should other people pay for that? Especially if you can, right? So it's an interesting dynamic to me that we always want someone else to handle our responsibilities. And so if I'm having someone come and, if I need care and someone's coming and getting me out of bed and getting me up and bringing me to the bathroom and feeding me and doing other things, right? Why? That's a lot of work for me. Shouldn't I be the one paying someone else to do all that work for me? Why does someone else need to pay for it? Right? And especially if I can, right? Again, if I literally can't and I still need it, then yes, someone else, thankfully we have Medicaid and all these things to make sure that some people still get care. We don't have people who are completely destitute. But if you can pay for it, then why shouldn't you? Right? And so, yeah, it can cost a lot. So where we find, right, is that a lot of people is, the general philosophy is, you build up money while you're working, you retire, and then you spend the money down, and you hope you die. You hope you run out of time before you run out of money. Because that's what this is, right? This is a race to see what's going to run out first, your money or your time. And so most people hope they die before they run out of money, right? And then the problem is, then what happens if you need long-term care? And it's $15,000 a month. It's $12,000 a month. And that's the other thing about the care, right? Medicaid will pay for care, but it's not for a private room. It's going to be you and some roommates. Probably plural, especially by the time you need it, right? It might be you and 3 other roommates all in one room. That's what Medicaid will pay for. And so if that's not what you want, then trying to hide all your assets and qualifying for something that's not for you shouldn't matter. And so I'd say rather than spending down your assets, right? Yeah, you go into retirement with $2 million and you're spending it down. And then what happens though if you need $15,000 a month and then it goes like this real fast? That's what people are afraid of, right? What if instead you had a strategy where if you're still working, you could maybe get to 2.5 before you retired. And then it would earn enough throughout retirement. Yes, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, where you basically, even though it's going up and down and you're pulling out 5% a year, more than the safe withdrawal rate, you have enough money where you are invested in such a way that you are living off the growth on average. And so on average, you are maintaining the same amount you started with. Which means that even when you get out, and if you're still going to die here, right? If you never need care, then you're going to die with as much as you started with. Awesome. You pass that on to your kids, they can do something with it, or to your churches and charities, all these things. But if you need care, and it's like, yes, $15,000 is a lot, $180,000 a year. What if you need 2 years of care? That's $360,000. Oh man, and out of 2.5, it's this. Right? And so you go from here to here at the end. Okay. All right, or what if it's instead of 2.5, what if it's 1 total? Okay, well, so then 300,000 looks more like this, and it's taking up a third of it instead of a sixth of it. Okay. This is still higher than this. You still have a lot of delta there. And so yes, it's a lot of money at the end, but you can, and you don't self-insure. That's a misnomer. You self-pay, right? You self-fund long-term care. Because you can also get a long-term care policy. You could buy insurance and but then the premium on that's so expensive that you're paying that premium the whole time. You're spending down more. And so if you never need it, you end up with this amount less to begin with. And if you do need it, good news, you have it, and so you'll still end up with this. But you may, unless you have a really bad long-term care stay, you may end up with less money overall even after using the insurance, let alone never needing it, buying the insurance. Because the long-term care insurance is really expensive, right? And so generally we'd say, hey, strategy over product. So let's build a retirement income and a retirement strategy where you, can live off the growth, have plenty in the end, and then self-fund, self-pay for long-term care in the end, because qualifying for Medicaid, qualifying for the government to pay for sub-great care, you're not going to want the care that they can pay for, especially if you can afford something else. I would rather have you afford good care than be stuck with bad care and try to get rid of a bunch of your money and hide it and try to make other people pay for your care, right? This is more responsible. It requires more ownership of your own life and care. You take, just Right. And so, right, if you're like, I don't want to do that, I definitely want to make other people pay for my care. Great. Then you can go somewhere else, right? I'm not really interested in helping people who are trying to take advantage of other people and make poor people pay for their care if they can pay for it. Again, if you're poor, awesome, no problem. Again, not a value, there's no equation there. But if you can afford for your own care and you're trying to make other people pay for it, that's just where I don't know. We're probably just, our values are too far apart for us to probably be helpful for you in the first place. So, right, if you don't have this kind of thing, we call this 3D retirement income, right? It's this book here, 3D Retirement Income, is all about it. You can get it for free in the links below. We have other videos on doing this, red bucket, blue bucket, equity-based retirement income. It's just way better. And so on a war to crusade, you may call it, to help people have a better retirement income, better retirement, more security in the back end for paying for things like long-term care, and all of that. And so if that's interesting to you, feel free to absorb more of my content, watch more videos, buy the book, whatever you want to do, and we're here to help. And if you want to schedule a free discovery meeting to see how we can help you directly, I think there's probably links in the bottom to do that well. Otherwise, again, my name is Freeman Linde, certified financial planner, tax expert. Hopefully this has been helpful for you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.